Let's bring in our panel, David Coleman from the government and Deb O'Neill from the opposition. Thank you both very much for your time. We'll get onto Manus Island in a moment. I just want to stick with jobs for now, though, and a reaction to the figures out today. First to you, David Coleman. Erica Betts says this shows that the government was right to scrap the carbon and mining taxes, reduce red tape, but the budget must be having an impact on confidence as well.
Well, look, David, I think the first point is that November was a very strong month for job creation, with more than 40,000 jobs created. And as you know, we've created more than 160,000 since being elected. So there are more Australians in work. And the rate we've got to of 6.3% is pretty much spot on what Labor's PFO predicted and our budget back in May. So it is important always to keep on the track of economic reform, and so that's why our $50 billion infrastructure program is so important. That's why it's important to close free trade agreements with China, Korea and Japan, and working on others as well, and to get rid of bad taxes like the carbon tax and the mining tax that just smash families and business for no economic benefit. We did see under Labor 1 in 10 manufacturing jobs lost during their time in office, and so it is encouraging to see some positive signs in the manufacturing sector as well. But certainly there's always more to be done, and that's why economic reform is something we're so deeply committed to.
Deb O'Neill, these figures aren't great, but surely they would have been worse if there were still taxes on manufacturing and mining in this country.
Well, look, the reality is that this government's been in for more than a year. When we get back, it'll be halfway very, very soon. And the reality is it's on their watch that we're seeing the highest unemployment rate in 12 years. You know, my son's turning 18 tomorrow. He was 6 when unemployment was this high. This government is running from its responsibilities. It's in a chaotic mess. It's casting back throughout the year to look for some small victories. But the reality is it's left Australians with a higher unemployment rate at the end of the year and absolutely appalling figures in terms of people's confidence about what the future might look like. And really, I think we can attribute it to an absolutely values-based budget that shows they simply don't understand the ordinary lives of working Australians. You know, for all their talk about the carbon price and the change that it's going to make to Australians, it's the end of the year in which they've got rid of it, unemployment's up, people's confidence is down, and people are frankly very, very frightened by what this government is trying to do on a whole lot of fronts, in education and health, just to name a couple.
David, youth unemployment 14.5% is now really the time to be pushing to withhold the dole for people under 30 for 6 months?
Well, David, look, unemployment is driven by economic activity, and the more economic activity we have, the more jobs we have for people right through the age spectrum. And we strongly believe in programs like Work for the Dole, because they encourage a sense of responsibility in young people and indeed create opportunities for them to form relationships in the workplace. But the key point, David, is that in order to drive jobs, and we have created 160,000 in the last 12 months, what you've got to do is manage the economy effectively. You can't spend money like a drunken sailor. You've got to close free trade agreements to help exporters and manufacturers, and you've got to pursue a range of structural reform to get rid of red tape. So whether it's youth or older workers, it's all about economic reform, and what it's not about is an obstructionist policy-free agenda that we saw that we're seeing from the Labor Party.
Deb O'Neill, what would Labor specifically like to see the government do to make an impact on that youth unemployment figure? And, you know, we know that you're opposed to the 6-month waiting period for the dole, but what about actually getting people back into work?
Well, they've done everything that they could possibly do to make it more and more difficult for young people to actually get the skills that they need to get a job. You know, Work for the Dole just a few months ago was going to result with students and young people in particular coming out with some qualification. This cheap version of Work for the Dole, which has failed before, is busy work that doesn't necessarily give people skills that for real jobs. We know that real jobs are generated when we give subsidies to employers to train young people on the job. That's the most effective way. They've got rid of all of that. They got rid of the Youth Connections program, which was the most powerful way of picking up the most vulnerable young people, most of them under 17, keeping them employed or in school at a rate of 85%. They got rid of that. You know, this is a government that has those no bounds in terms of heaping more and more disadvantage on young people. And it's hard enough for them to look at figures where it says this is the highest level of unemployment in 12 years as you leave school. And for you as a young person, it's 14.5%. And in regions like the Central Coast and out in rural New South Wales, even higher. This government has no answers for these young people. They're taking away education opportunities, they're taking away training, and they're in concert with the state Liberals who are basically taking an axe to the TAFE system.
David, if I could just sort of jump in there. I mean,
a very brief response.
Yeah.
We've got to take a break.
History is very clear that the unemployment rate declines when economic growth is strong. We have a suite of measures to grow the economy. Labor have failed abysmally in this area.
They're not working.
They are working, and we've created 160,000 jobs in 12 months.
At its highest in 12 years.
And what the problem that we have is an obstructionist Labor Party that tried to stop us getting rid of the carbon tax, fortunately failed, and tries to stop the important reforms that we're putting in place.
Okay, we're going to have to take a quick break here. We will be back with more, though, right after this. Stay with us.
Still, better garden power tools. Hard to wrap, easy to give. Steel blowers, assembled, fueled, ready to go. Buy better at 450 Steel stores across Australia.
Give a little bit.
Grab the perfect gift for less at Target. With new features and a sleek look, play large with new Nintendo 3DS XL. It's $229. It's Christmas. It's Target.
Hotels Combined presents clever ideas that make travel easy. Binder clips are more handy than you think. They can keep your earbuds tangle-free, protect your razor, or keep your money safe. Ingenious. Just like Hotels Combined, which quickly compares hundreds of hotel booking sites and combines them into one simple search. So finding the best deal is easy. Save on your hotel at Hotels Combined or download our free app today.
Introducing the Renault Koleos, where Bose audio meets an exquisite leather interior and 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty. Available until December 31st from just $35,990. Hurry in to your local Renault dealership today.
Some of these natural gas projects are huge.
Finding energy takes more than just energy companies.
How do we make them big for Australian businesses?
Gorgon, Weestain. These projects can't happen without Australian companies.
We bring a lot to the table. Skills, local knowledge.
Chevron's putting $40 billion to work with local businesses.
Good people.
And there's more to come.
That's how we'll all
We
succeed.
couldn't succeed without them.
If only everything was as easy as creating your website with Wix. Go to Wix.com today. It's free.
The only number that matters to us is the one-to-one, the relationship between you and your Jenny. It's why it will work for you. Start today and save 50% on our most popular program. Plus, you'll get $50 off your Jenny food. Call Jenny now.
This is a humble Vita Wheat whole grain. He's pretty wonderful. He gives you sustained, slow-release whole grain energy to keep you going. Arnott's Vita Wheat, made with 100% whole grains for energy that lasts.
If you suffer from muscle aches, pains, cramps, or muscle spasms, Mega Magnesium's exclusive, highly absorbable magnesium can help. Ethical Nutrients, we can help you.
You'll find just what you want this Christmas at Maya, with 30% off food for gifts and confectionery and $15 off for every $75 spent on small electrical kitchen appliances. Conditions and exclusions apply. Ends Sunday, December 14. Wonderful's waiting. Go out and find it.
You're watching Lunchtime Agenda. Deb O'Neill and David Coleman are still with me. I want to get both your reactions to the breaking news this half hour of the committee into the Manus Island riots of February this year, which has recommended that the government acknowledge and take responsibility for the violations of human rights that occurred in February and also provide compensation to those who suffered, including the family of Reza Barati, who was killed in that riot. David Coleman, first of all.
Look, I obviously haven't seen the report, David. I believe it's just come out in the last 20 minutes or so, and the government will review that report and all the information about Manus Island and respond in due course. So obviously we've been keen to ensure that there is a thorough investigation of these matters, and we'll respond in due course.
Deb O'Neill.
Well, look, what we've seen of Scott Morrison in this role is a very heavy-handed approach, and one that seems to have been exercised with very little care for the people who are caught up in the chaos of living as an asylum seeker. The reality is that what we saw in the Senate last Thursday evening and into Friday morning was a man who's grabbing at power to assert himself in an increasingly chaotic environment of the Abbott government. And I really think that it is time that he should take responsibility. So certainly that recommendation I would be inclined to support. Of course, there'll be more detail in the report, and with it being released just 20 minutes ago, obviously I'll have to have a closer look at it before making further comment.
Yeah, David, understandable entirely.
Sorry, David, I do need to respond on the point about Scott Morrison. I think for Deb to use the word chaotic in the context of immigration policy is laughable, to say the least. If there was anything that was chaotic in the last Labor government, it was the appalling handling of the borders. Scott Morrison is doing a fantastic job in effectively stopping the boats in the last 12 months, and through getting that TPV legislation through last week, that will also help us to deal with that huge backlog of unprocessed asylum seekers that came to our shores under Labor.
Okay, well, let's move on. I want to look at climate politics, and we see yesterday the government announcing $200 million from the aid budget to go towards climate mitigation in poorer countries in the region. David Coleman, is now the time, and why is now the time when it wasn't before, to be investing in this sort of area?
Well, look, David, we have a number of initiatives in place in the Asia-Pacific region, in particular, in a similar vein. There are a number of climate-related funds in Vietnam where we contribute some significant millions already. So it's consistent with that, and these are practical infrastructure-related projects. And important point for people to understand here is there's no incremental cost to the budget. This is a reallocation of funds within the foreign aid budget, so no incremental cost to the budget, and we think that this is a sensible, modest and proportionate contribution to that larger global fund.
Deb O'Neill, I would have thought Labor would be pleased with this, yet Bill Shorten did find a way to attack Tony Abbott for, well, essentially hypocrisy yesterday.
Well, absolutely. Perhaps now we know why Tony Abbott didn't want to let Julie Bishop out without a chaperone. You know, you've got to watch these pesky women. You've got one of them on board, but you know, when she gets overseas, you never know what she might do. The reality is, 3.5 weeks ago at the G20, we had the most embarrassing experience as a nation on an international issue of concern, climate change. You know, Tony Abbott and Julie Bishop and the whole team, they were there, they were opposed to it, and they got elected on being anti-climate change. They're climate change deniers. You know, that's part of what they're pushing left, right and centre. This is a massive backflip from a government that, I will say again, is in chaos. They don't know what they're doing. They're not consulting properly. They're having to overturn decisions that were essential scripts for them in the lead up to the last election. And the reality is they are all at sea, and they have no idea about where to lead this nation. And that is why we are seeing such incredible numbers in terms of people's anxiety about the future. And today's jobless rate is a reflection of an entire economy that's concerned about the leadership of this government.
David Coleman, I'll get you to respond to that, but also I want to ask you, why is Australia pushing now for a legally binding target in Paris? The claim from your opponents is that this is because the government knows that this won't be palatable to countries like the United States.
Well, David, look, when this whole area of climate, very important to differentiate between facts and the extraordinary hyperbole that we hear from Deb and others. Now, we're on track to meet our target of a 5% reduction in 2000 levels by 2020.
No one
That's
believes you.
happen.
No one
That's
believes you
happen.
on this anymore. You're simply unbelievable.
And the reality is we will achieve that goal. The reality also is that we're taking direct action, which is well in advance of many other nations around the world. So it's not about, it's not about sort of grand press releases. It's about substantive action on the ground. So we are very determined to hit that target, and we'll do so. In terms of the Paris negotiations, now of course, as you know, David, one of the failures of Kyoto was for all the grand pronouncements. All those grand pronouncements amounted to very little in the cold light of day. And so what we're saying is, well, if we're going to have an agreement in Paris, let's have a sensible, real agreement with real binding targets. And for Australia to put its foot forward and contribute to that, we want to see other nations do the same. That's entirely reasonable, and that's what a responsible government should do.
Just before we go, I do want to get both your thoughts on something that has happened. It is fairly momentous in this building. One of the most respected members of either House of Parliament, John Faulkner, has announced he will be retiring. Deb O'Neill, what does that mean for the Labor Party?
Well, we lose a great warrior for our cause. I think that in recent speeches, both at the memorial for Gough Whitlam and then in the closing days of this year, John's speech in response to the loss of Philip Hughes just reveals him as a man of considerable careful thinking, a historian, a man with a heart for people who has lived out his life in the service of public, in the Labor tradition, fighting for equitable access for everyone to education and to health. And I think he certainly provided incredible scrutiny through the process of estimates, and I think he'll be well and long remembered as a great champion of the Labor cause and a fine Australian, a man of integrity who's upheld the best instincts of Australians who have served in our parliament.
Okay. David Coleman, in 10 seconds or less, we're almost out of time.
Look, Senator Faulkner is a person of real substance and integrity. We wish him all the best for the future. And to be frank, he's a reminder of a reform era of Labor in the 80s and 90s that we don't see today.
Thank you both very much for joining us, and thanks for your company at home. We are out of